Hi, welcome. Thank you for joining. I'm super grateful for the opportunity to share with you today as a self-taught 12D user. Whether you're a veteran of 12D, you're a self-taught user like me, or you're just starting to learn 12D, I'm hoping that my experience and the project I'm going to showcase today are able to give you some tips and tricks or some things that can help you with your 12D modeling. So like I said, today I'm just going to be talking about my own personal journey, how I learned 12D. I'll be talking about some of the lessons that I learned, some of the resources that I found useful, and finally I'll be talking about a recent project I worked on which used some interesting pad grading sort of techniques. But before I get into that, I should introduce myself. My name is Enrol Folkestone. I'm a civil engineer and I live on the Sunshine Coast in southeast Queensland. I've been a civil engineer for about 5 years or just over now, designing and supervising civil infrastructure projects. Straight out of uni, I ended up getting a job with Blue Engineering, a bit of a smaller player in the industry, or by industry standards. But certainly over that 5 years, I've had the opportunity to work on a variety of different projects, small and large, all throughout Queensland and New South Wales. And if you can think of a certain civil infrastructure sort of design process, whether it be pavement or stormwater, sewer, water, flooding, driveways, car parks, I've really been blessed with the opportunity to work on a lot of those different aspects, and that kind of comes with working in a small sort of firm. You have a chance at a few different things, and part of that is I've been able to work with 12D, and I've been able to learn a few different interesting sort of components of it. So it's been very rewarding 5 years, and I'm looking forward to what's yet to come. But yeah, let's get into it. So like I said, I've only been at this for 5 years, and I can still remember what it was like before 12D and what my first impressions were. I remember before 12D, I did a lot of things from first principles, hand calculations. I did a lot of design spreadsheets. I'm an engineer, so of course I love Excel. I learned how to use AutoCAD and how to draft things in that sort of sense. And I worked with a lot of other design software, certainly software that in my opinion wasn't as good as 12D, so I can appreciate the differences between 12D and some of the other ones out there. But like I was saying, I can remember my first impressions of 12D, and if you just take a moment now, can you remember what your first impression of 12D was? You know, I've got a screenshot there. It shows the project I'm about to talk about. So I remember opening up a project like this where I had a colleague in the office at the time, and this was about year one, start of year two sort of thing as an engineer. And he says, come check out this 12D program. You'll probably need to learn this. It's a good software package for you to learn. And so he shows me how to use it. And I remember my first impression. My first impression was, why are there so many buttons? There's a button, 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 there's a button. Buttons, buttons, buttons. And as he's opening buttons, it's expanding and becoming more buttons. And there's, more text within text within text. You've all used 12D. I'm sure you can relate with that sort of feeling. So I just felt overwhelmed. I felt like there was a lot of data. Just looking at that screen now, there's a lot of lines, there's a lot of colors, there's a lot of buttons. And I just thought, wow, 12D just looks overwhelmingly technical. I'm not sure if I can learn this, if I can pick this up. It's a bit too much compared to what I'm used to with, spreadsheets or just AutoCAD. Much simpler, just looks like it looks, But obviously from there, I just got into it. My number one piece of advice would just model it, just get into it. So after a few months after that colleague took off and I had to learn 12D by myself. I didn't have anyone else in the office that knew how to use it. And a big part of learning 12D was just acknowledging that each project is a learning opportunity. For me, I learnt on the job. It's a very good way of learning, is to just practice what you're doing. So one job might have been on stormwater, one job was on driveways or car parks or pavements, whatever the case may be. Each job showed me something new. And obviously a big part of that too, although I didn't have anyone in my office that knew 12D, I still sought advice. It's the best way to try and improve yourself is to get someone else's perspective. And even people that don't know 12D, they would help me. You know, I might spend 2 hours looking at this nitty gritty thing which I can't understand, and someone would say, why are you doing that when you can do something else? It's definitely worthwhile getting that outside opinion, in my opinion. But by far what's helped me learn 12D is 12D's free resources. And if you haven't kind of looked into 12D's resources, I definitely encourage you to, because I've found 100% of what I've ever needed to know in 12D, I've been able to find more or less in 3 different ways, 3 different steps. Those being webinars and videos. 12D has a number of them. 12D's online forum, so not this one, but a chat that they have online. And of course, just talking direct with 12D, with 12D support. So as I was saying, or as I was alluding to, I found that those webinars or those videos normally answered about 90% of my questions. So there's webinars on earthworks, on road design, on stormwater design. They cover off the basics, how to bring in IFD data, how to set up your super alignments, do your geometry. So that was super helpful. That helped me set up all my projects. But sometimes I would come across a project or an aspect of a design and I'd just go, the video doesn't quite cover this. It doesn't delve into this detail. I have these questions that I can't answer. Of course, I've only been a 12D user at this point 3 to 4 years. So I'm not super knowledgeable, but there's a lot of guys that are very knowledgeable. For instance, a lot of the other presenters at this tech forum are very knowledgeable in 12D. And those people, they're normally on 12D forum. And if I have a question, someone else has probably had that same question and they've probably put it up there, and one of these real experts at 12D, people that could model circles around me, they've answered it. So I can spend 30 minutes really focused on how do I do this? How do I overcome this confusing thing that I don't understand? Then I go on the forum and I realize someone's already asked that question, and of course one of these experts has answered it. So there you go, 5 minutes and I've got my answer. So that probably takes care of the last 10%. But if there's still that one thing, you can't find it in the videos or in the forums, because I can think of a few projects where I just wasn't sure, I couldn't find the answer I was looking for, I actually contacted 12D direct. Email them. That's the last 1%. And there you have 100% of the questions you have in 12D, I've found I could get in these 3 different ways. So if you haven't looked at these resources, definitely encourage you to have a look at them, because there's a lot that you can learn. Of course, what I haven't mentioned here is the 12D manual, obviously how to use 12D. I can think back again to when I first started with it, being a fairly new user. The first 3 months of using 12D, I would left click, right click, accept. 3-step process to select something. And it wasn't until about 3 months in or something I realized you could use the middle mouse button or the scroll wheel to select things. And just taking that one step out of it just made life so much easier, so much faster. And there's lots of little tips and tricks like that in the 12D manual on snapping or drafting things that can really help you use 12D really efficiently. Or that's what I've found at least. So keeping all of that in mind, I just wanted to share this recent project that I worked on. It was a very interesting project, a lot of constraints. So off the bat, we got brought into this project at the detailed design stage. In Queensland, that's operational works approval and construction details. For New South Wales, it would be a construction certificate or CC. So the scope for us was to do the stormwater design. That included the OSD and the pipe out, as well as all the internal design aspects themselves, pit and pipe system. There's obviously a lot of pavement in service station areas, so we had to look at the pavement design. There's the earthworks that's associated with all of that. And then the last thing, was the frontage works all around the site. So it was quite an interesting project. It had a few different parts, but what made it interesting wasn't the scope, but the constraints of the project right? I'm sure you can all think of projects with a number of constraints. So delving into them, straight off the bat, we had stakeholders that we had to kind of look at. We had on this side of the site, Southport Nerang Road, which is a state-controlled road, transport main roads in Queensland. We had Industrial Ave, which is a council-owned road. We had a fast food outlet, which was going to be in a portion of the building. And then obviously the whole site was a fuel station. So there was the fuel provider too. Between those four, there was 4 sets of conditions and specifications, standards, test, construction requirements that had to be upheld or had to be compared. Sometimes there was conflicting data and we had to go with obviously the more conservative or the one that fulfilled both criteria. And that was very interesting in itself. But beyond that, with the actual site constraints, we had a lot of level issues. And that started right at the outlet level. So from the OSD tank out to the existing pit further down the street, there wasn't a lot of fall. We ended up running that at its minimum gradient. And that's just to get that OSD tank as low as possible. Obviously that restricted our pavement heights. If we can't get the OSD lower, we can't get the pavement above it lower, right? And that played in with this other issue, which was a flat bund. I'm not sure if you've worked with service stations before, but they do have a bund that goes under the canopy area, and that bund is supposed to hold in fuel spills and things of that nature. And part of that is that the bund itself is flat, and that's to contain the flows. If it was an angle, the flows could kind of come out, you know? So we needed to hold a certain volume in there, and that volume had to have a level around the whole bund. And so instantly between the OSD and the bund, that entire front section had to shift at once as each was moved or as the bund was moved. Taking into account as well, AVs and fuel sort of tankers had to enter and exit the site. We were very limited with our grades. So we've got maximum grade change issues there. If you've worked with commercial trucks sort of grades before, you'd know that your grade changes are of concern. So that OSD tank, we couldn't really raise it without affecting that entrance. So that was another limitation. We also had car park falls. Obviously we can't have sharp cross falls or other gradients next to the car parks because people will scrape out or people will fall or whatever the case may be when they get out of their car. On top of that, we had pedestrian access. So you can see this is starting to get really messy, and that every one of these constraints I've talked about has to do with falls and gradients, minimums and maximum falls. So we actually ended up having to design or redesign the site layout here with the architect to allow pedestrians to access the buildings from the street along that path there. Further to this again, we had a second stage, which we weren't designing in the future, with an OSD tank, which a portion of our works had to drain to. So we had to make sure that our site really connected in well with that, because we don't want to be giving future engineers or designers a headache trying to fix our mistakes. And all of this alongside just additional cost savings and value add. You know, obviously you want to do a good job there, reduce retaining walls, take a step out of the building, things like that. It just led towards a really constrained site. One that was really balanced between stormwater, which I've noticed the last constraint there, and pavement. We wanted it flat to keep all the access things at bay, you know, allow cars to drive in and out, pedestrians, AVs, but we also needed enough fall through the site to get stormwater out. And those two things really battled one another. It was difficult to get the fall and to get the grades that we were after. So in the end, it became a real big Rubik's Cube, where if I moved one thing at one site, you know, maybe the OSD shifted up a little bit, it had a ripple effect that went through the whole site. And it was, that was the critical thing here, was trying to keep on top of all the data. When you have this many constraints across the whole site, how do you manage your data? Personally, what I found really helpful, pad grading tools. Recently there was a webinar by 12D on using pad grading for alternative uses. So not just using it for allotments or for developments, but for other aspects. So I actually took that concept from what I'd learned in that sort of resource, and I applied it to this site. So right here you can see on this screenshot, it's zoomed in on a portion of the site. That's just for clarity. You can see that there's a lot of lines and it's not really easy to see what's happening there. Right off the bat, you can probably see there's a curb ramp. You can see buns and things like that. That's the drive-through, the car parking, the building. But what levels are there? Who knows? If this was a super alignment or something, I'd need a long section to see what's happening. And even then, if it's wrapping around, it can be a little confusing to follow. But once you apply pad grading, instantly you can see levels, you can see grades as well. You can see that that line is flat and that line is 1 in 40 or whatever it might be. And that tells you where things are going. As well as that, for these sorts of sites with a lot of different things that are connected, these tools really allow you to move things up and down, tilt things, regrade things, easily edit things. And pad grading tools, very helpful on this job. Something else that I found very helpful personally is using 12D's tools to create visual cues. Obviously this is a zoomed in portion of the site, but you can imagine as you zoom out and there's a lot that's happening and the effects trickle on through the whole site, I was finding it difficult to keep on track of how things interacted. And what I found helpful with that was using contours and applying arrows and things of that nature to very quickly see where things are falling. And you can see, as I've changed that, you can see where the pavement's falling, where the stormwater would fall. You can see how it interacts. We're going up onto a pathway or around a bend, or the water would come around this curb, whatever the case might be. Beyond that, I also use 3D views. So as you spin around in your 3D, you can see things that the contours might not show you. Things like a difference in curb height. Maybe you've accidentally put 100 mil in there instead of 150. You might spot that in 3D easier than with these contours. At least that's what I found very helpful. The other thing I found very helpful on this job was replicating data, was trying to eliminate the amount of work that I had to do, because there's no need to reinvent the wheel. Obviously you can think of things in terms of other things. So in this project, for instance, I was working with a lot of pad grading. I could consider the curb top to just be an offset of the curb invert. So that meant I could just design just the curb inverts. I'm working off a base model, and then I can offset everything relative to that. And maybe if I tweak part of the curb invert, I need to tweak the curb top as well. Or maybe I just need to delete and re-replicate that data. It just saves a lot of time rather than me redrawing in the entire thing by itself. There's lots of little tools like that in 12D. If you read the 12D manual or watch the webinars, you'll see all these tools that help you do those things. And obviously there's a lot of those tools are things like snippets for super alignments or templates and things like that, which just do the work for you straight away. So as part of that, what I've found really helpful as a self-taught user is to learn 12D's language. For instance, learning that a lot of their snippets use curb top and curb invert, or KI, KT, to function properly. Just means when I'm setting my model up, I'm setting it up so it works with their tools, so that they do the work, rather than me having to set up my own sort of stuff. I definitely respect people that can write their own macros, but I'm not quite at that level with 12D. So again, just trying to limit the amount of work that I'm doing and let 12D do it for me. And through that, I was able to come up with, on this job at least, a solution that worked with all those constraints, something that was easy for me to visually see, as I changed this aspect, how it affected other parts of the project. And that just reduced the workload. It was a very interesting project to work on. Lots of fun, definitely. So, in conclusion, I'll just say 12D, it can look really complicated, but it's not. So if you're just starting out at 12D or you're not sure what to do, don't worry, just look into 12D's free resources. That's what I've done, and it's taught me a lot about 12D, and it gets you a lot of the way. It's not as complicated as you think. And finally, just make use of those tools and those resources. Use things like pad grading tools for alternative uses, and use visual cues to aid you with those complex designs. Again, those sorts of things being things that I've learnt in webinars and those free resources, and have really helped me. So I hope you found this webinar or this short talk insightful, and I hope you've been able to take some tips and tricks yourself from this. Thank you.